Hey there, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. Mostly when we talk about saving and investing, we talk about all those things that are within your realm of control. Like, are you living below your means? Or are you saving a decent chunk and putting that towards your future investments? Perhaps that's 15, 20, 25%, maybe higher if you're a super saver. But the way we talk about it, we really talk about putting the burden back on the individual. As in, what are you doing to ensure your financial success? Which is fair because we can only control certain factors, and focusing on the things that are within your control, well, sometimes that's really all you can do. But with that said, there are a number of factors that are outside of your control that are at least worth keeping in mind. Because the truth of the matter is, your success as an investor, your ability to reach financial freedom when you want to and have the lifestyle you want to, is largely determined by factors outside of your control. The main factor to consider is your rate of return. This is by far the most important factor in determining the ending balance of your portfolio. And sure, you can go with a conservative portfolio or a moderate portfolio or an aggressive portfolio. And generally speaking, the more aggressive your asset allocation, the higher the historical rates of return these portfolios have seen. And of course, a more aggressive asset allocation comes with greater volatility. I actually go into more detail on these specific portfolio types in a recent video. I will link it down below in the description box if you're interested in checking it out. We always hear about that often quoted, that the stock market returns roughly 10% per year. And of course, that's not every year, as some years are up and some years are down. But long term, that trend is up, which is wonderful and what we bank on as investors. But the big question you have to ask yourself is, what's the realistic rate of return that we can expect going forward? The vast majority of us as investors tend to suffer from a bias. We tend to think the future is going to look a lot like the past, and it might, but it might not. Consider the American economy. We have a very large and advanced nation, presently the largest GDP in the world. We have experienced incredible growth over the past 100 years or so. Think the first TV, first traffic light, mass-produced household appliances, all the way to the first computers, the internet, and wireless devices. There has been an incredible amount of innovation that has been captured in the past 100 years or so, and that has absolutely been reflected in our stock market. Do you think it's realistic to expect that our nation can expand and advance at the same rate? And that's a genuine question, and by no means am I suggesting that innovation is done, quite the contrary. But I always like the analogy of a speedboat versus a cruise ship. A speedboat is smaller, it can be more nimble, it can accelerate quickly, it can change courses quickly. A cruise ship, while very powerful, doesn't have the same capabilities. For it to change course requires a great amount of time. It simply can't compete on speed. And sometimes when things are larger, think an economy, they're harder to move forward. They're harder to change courses and change directions. With that kind of thought process, is it more reasonable to expect more modest returns going forward, irrespective of our past returns? Major financial firms like Vanguard give a far lower anticipated rate of return on US stocks, more in the range of 4.7 to 6.7%. And when you invest over a lifetime, the compound interest you earn on your portfolio actually ends up being the bulk of your portfolio rather than your actual contributions. But simply look at the difference in the ending balances using 4.7 or 6.7 or even an 8 or a 10% rate of return over the course of an entire investing career. The lifestyles offered by each of these portfolios would be vastly different. Now, of course, no one knows exactly what the future rates of return are going to look like, but it might be more wise to use a more conservative number when running your projections. Could the future look a lot like the past, and could we see 10% rates of return? Absolutely. Could the returns be less going forward? Absolutely. But if you bank on lesser returns and adjust your investing habits accordingly, you're far more likely, or you increase your odds of actually hitting your goals or simply coming out ahead, which is a great position to be in. A far worse position to be in is to hit the age you wanted to hit financial independence, only to look at your account and find you're nowhere near the number you needed. My personal 2 cents is that there is an incentive for companies like Vanguard to give lower forecasted future rates of return. You have to remember they are in a business, they have clients to serve. So if they say they expect a future return of 6% and then the market returns 8%, their clients are going to be ecstatic. However, if they say they expect a 9% rate of return and then the market only returns 8%, their clients are going to be quite upset. It tempers expectations. So anytime you hear someone forecasting future returns, make sure to take it with a grain of salt. Personally, when I run projections, I do an 8% rate of return because that motivates me to see what things could potentially grow into. But when it comes to my investing habits, I invest in a way that even if I only get a 5% rate of return, I will still hit my goals. So in that way, I kind of feel like all my bases are covered. The other major uncontrollable factor comes down to the sequence of return risk, namely how the market performs when you step away from the workforce. How the market performs in the very first years you step away from the workforce and start drawing on your portfolio will have a profound impact on your standard of living. If the market performs well in the years immediately following your retirement, odds are pretty good you're going to have a more robust portfolio. However, if the market performs poorly in the years immediately following your retirement, it might leave you in a very vulnerable position, and there's nothing you can do to influence how the market performs. Let's consider an example with 2 people who each retire with $1 million portfolio, and they're both going to follow that popular rule of 4%. That is to say, they're going to withdraw 4% of their portfolio each year in retirement. In this case, with $1 million portfolio, that starting withdrawal is going to be $40,000. For the sake of simplicity with this one, we're going to ignore that annual adjustment for inflation, and we're going to keep that withdrawal constant at $40,000 each year. The time frame that we're going to look at is 2000 to 2001, using the actual performance of the S&P 500. So if our investor starts out with $1 million and at the end of every single year withdraws his $40,000 and does that every year for 21 years straight, based on how the market actually performed over that time frame, his portfolio would nearly be cut in half by the end of those 21 years. His balance would be just over $500,000. And the reason for that can actually be traced back to what happened in those first 3 years of his retirement. The market dropped 10% in 2000, 13% in 2001, and 23% in 2002. In just those 3 years, his portfolio was cut in half, and he still had to make his withdrawals because he was no longer receiving an income. His portfolio simply lost so much ground in the beginning that it was really hard to come back from. Now let's consider another investor. Same $1 million portfolio, same annual withdrawal of $40,000, and we're still going to use the actual returns of the S&P 500, but this time we're going to reverse the order of them. So this investor, instead of immediately being hit by 3 down years, retires into a market upswing. Those negative years happen, they just happen at a later time. Here's how that investor's portfolio would fare over time. After 21 years of withdrawals, his portfolio is more than double its initial starting point. And much of that is attributed to the fact that this investor retired into a very robust upswing market. In fact, throughout his entire retirement, at no point does his portfolio dip below his starting balance. And let's compare these investors' portfolios side by side over time. Look at the balances of their portfolios and the profound difference of retiring into either a positive or a negative market. Remember, these retirees started with the exact same amounts and made the exact same withdrawals. The only difference is the market performance. That's the uncontrollable factor. How is the market going to perform? What if you retire in a down market, but that's near the very bottom, and say it starts on an upswing that lasts for a few years? Well, then you actually retired at a great time. Or say you retired in a positive market, but maybe the market then takes a turn and goes down for the next couple years. You don't know what the next couple years hold. And you absolutely can influence when you step away from the workforce. Maybe you decide to work a few extra years to build up that portfolio. Or maybe you decide your portfolio is sufficient enough to allow you to retire a few years earlier. But the important thing to note is that often once you step away from the workforce, it can be hard to go back into a career if you find that your portfolio isn't where it should have been. And there's certainly ways to make the situation better if you do retire into a down market. First and foremost, you could employ a bucket strategy. Again, I do have a whole video on this one that I will link down below if you're interested. But basically, you would have a short-term bucket, and this would have short-term cash reserves or cash-like equivalents. And keep this bucket rather robust. Maybe you have up to 2 years worth of expenses in it. That would prevent you from having to make withdrawals in a down market. Then you could simply replenish the bucket when the market was in a better position. The other method is to employ what's known as a dynamic spending strategy. This is where you would actually adjust your spending in your retirement based on the performance of the market or based on inflation. When the market is up or inflation's low, you would withdraw more and allow yourself to spend more. When the market's down or inflation's high, you would tighten your belt and you would spend less. So you withdraw less in down markets and more in up markets. Vanguard has found that retirees who employ this dynamic spending strategy or more flexible spending strategy have more success with their portfolios over time. I really love this approach because your spending is probably not the exact same from year to year. There's probably years where you want to spend more, maybe you want to take a bigger trip or you have a bigger home repair, maybe you need a new car. Then there's probably years where it's easy to spend less. So if you can find a way to align your spending with the market's performance, well, that's just going to help you make the most of your money and make your money go the furthest. How the market performs over time will always be outside of your control. And the market's returns over time will absolutely be the biggest determining factor in the ending balance of your portfolio and the lifestyle you're able to live from it. You can certainly do things to stack the deck in your favor, like saving more over time. So even if those returns from the market are more conservative, you still ensure that you'll hit your goals. And then once you approach retirement, making sure to employ a more dynamic withdrawal and a dynamic spending strategy to ensure that you're weathering even the bumpiest of markets. What are your thoughts on future rates of return? Let me know in the comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye.